Okay, we're gonna get going, everybody. Just so you all know, I'm gonna try and watch the waiting room just to see if people log in while we get started here. But first of all, I wanted to just take an opportunity to thank everybody for joining us this evening for some club and volleyball updates. Looks like we're over 60 participants now. I don't know if that means people would rather hear us talk than the U.S. presidential election debate, but maybe some of you are PVRing it for later. But it's also good to see the interest in people and joining us online, so that's great to see. My name is John Blatcher. For those that don't know, I'm the Executive Director for Volleyball Manitoba. Other staff that are joining us online are Scott Koski, our Provincial Performance Coach, Anthony Roberts, our Director of Competitions and Membership Services, and our newly hired Manager of Communications and Special Events, Adam de Jonk here is with us, along with our numerous board members. We have 12 board members that are involved with our organization, along with numerous committee members that put in a ton of voluntary time and effort throughout the year to help us with our program planning and governance. As you all know, the past months have been very challenging for everyone, to say the least. Since things have shut down as of the past March, we've made a lot of sacrifices. We've all made a lot of sacrifices, and in recent months, we've also made a lot of progress. And we've been fortunate for our sport that we've been able to get back on the court. Many other sports and activities have resumed, and we've been privileged to be one of those. We started back in the summer with our return to play with beach volleyball on the outdoor courts, and later in the summer, our return to play stage 2 advanced us to some small group training on the indoor courts. Later in August and September, our primary discussion was not really to rush any next steps as schools returned. Our focus at that time was primarily around a safe return to the classroom. Wasn't necessarily about the extracurricular activities such as school sports or other activities. They weren't a high priority as COVID continued to escalate throughout the later summer and early fall. Now we've advanced a little bit further with our RTP stage 3, and we'll talk a little bit about where we are with that, and Scott will give a little bit more details on that. During this entire time, and even now, we continue to monitor daily, as everybody probably does, the state of COVID and how it's affecting our community and how it's affecting our sport. We've prioritized a lot of time and a lot of energy within our office and within a lot of our board members and committee members to getting kids back on the court, getting programs back on the court with our return to play planning. All of that, considering we're doing it in a safe manner and responsible manner as possible. We all know that our goal is to reduce the risk as much as possible, to reduce the transmission risk of COVID as much as possible on our courts, but we know that it's impossible to eliminate the risk completely. We need to recognize that. As we all know, just a quick overview on the school volleyball season. It's taken a big hit. It's being impacted greatly. Not many schools, I'm not sure if it would be more than 50% at the JV and varsity levels are back on court, even at the training levels. Games are only being allowed as of this past week. We might even see some games being played next week in some areas of the province that are within the COVID yellow response areas. As of right now, MHSAA provincials for high school sports have been suspended specifically for our interest for volleyball. Although not yet officially canceled, they have been suspended till current time. Most of you are probably aware of that. As volleyball opportunities have been limited for many due to the lack of school volleyball activity, many of you clubs out there have filled this volleyball gap or void through your camps this fall. Kids and parents have been appreciative in the opportunities to get back to playing some sport. And being active, as we all know, is so important to our health and well-being. I know that our daughter, she's back swimming with her swim club this past month, and it's been a blessing for her. It's been very valuable for her. It's been very valuable for us as parents. But we all want to be comfortable and confident that the protocols that we have in place, that the activities that our kids have in place are safe, and we're confident. We feel confident that the kids are in safe environments. As we move forward throughout the fall, we need to continue to remain diligent. We need to all please remain real diligent and adhere to our return to play guidelines, the public health guidelines, our facility guidelines as best we can, as best possible. This is instrumental in helping to ensure that a club volleyball season starting in December and continuing through the winter can happen in whatever form that might be. This is not only for volleyball, it's for our community, and it's to keep everybody as safe as possible. Our goal and hope is to continue moving forward and moving ahead over the next few weeks and over the next few months, and not be interrupted with any pauses or restrictions or rollbacks in any activities that we might be doing. COVID is in the community. We all know that, and case counts are high. They're not going down. They're not moving in the right direction. One of the things that I think we can all be more aware of is as we go through our daily activities, especially if we have our own kids, but even if we're running programs, is to look at the number of cross cohorts these kids might be involved in. And it's not just kids, it's us as adults, if we're involved in other activities as well. But if you look at if someone's playing with their school and maybe doing some training, then they're going on the weekend and doing some club activity, and then they're proceeding maybe to a dance class, and let alone the school cohorts that they're in. If you look at the web of that and the tracing that would be required if there was any positive cases in that, it's complicated. It's not something we want to venture into. So planning for the upcoming season has not been an easy task for us, as you can imagine, but we continue to plan and we continue to evolve with our planning, and we'll continue to develop. These plans will continue to develop in the coming weeks. So this town hall was an opportunity for us to present to you where we're at and to look at where we may be going forward with the club volleyball season. Just a few notes as we go through the I think most of us are familiar with Zoom, but if you're not, we do have a few rules and things if people can respect. One of them is that I've muted everybody. I'll try and continue to make sure I'm muting everybody. So if you do happen to see your mic on and there seems to be some background noise, please remute yourself. There is a chat box on the side. So if you're not familiar, you can go along the bottom of your Zoom box and you'll see a bunch of icons there. One of them will say chat. You can click on that. If you have questions at all as we proceed, as we go along, please type in your question. Anthony's going to be monitoring the questions as we proceed, and whether it's a question that we'll ask at that time, or if it's a question that we'll address at the end, we'll figure that out. We want to try and answer all the questions that might come forward. It's okay. I think we're going to get started then. I'm going to share a screen here. It's got our PowerPoint presentation. I'll do that right now. And I believe our first topic is primarily, I'll run through our agenda really quick.
John, you might want to note that we're recording too, just in case anybody is wondering.
Have been recording for sure, yeah. So if anybody does want to go back and review anything or share this otherwise afterwards with anybody else, we will be recording and we'll be posting it on our website tomorrow. Everybody see the PowerPoint presentation? Should be on your screen shared. So just a real quick agenda that I shared on the email as well is that we are just going to go through a quick return to play update. Scott's going to do that. And then we're going to just talk a little bit more specifically about the club volleyball season, and some of the items that we'll review and provide some information on are listed there. So as we continue here, and Anthony, you're okay if there does, if some questions do come about? You can monitor the chat box as we proceed.
Ready and waiting.
All right, so return to play. I'm gonna, actually, before we get started, maybe Scott, I will show the website, just where all this information is. And I don't know if you want me to just keep the PowerPoint, Scott, or if you want me to just show the website documents.
I think if you just show where it is on the website and then just navigate back to your PowerPoint, it'll just be a little bit more efficient.
Sure. I'm gonna look if I can do that really quickly right now. Bear with me. Okay, so this is our website, and although you all more than likely receive the information by e-newsletter, you might have seen it social media. We're trying to post post all the updates on all of our communication channels as best possible. This is where you'll see all of the updates, and if there is any revisions or updates to any of the documents, we'll continue to post them on the website here. So if we click in the October 19th update, it is loading, and you'll see our last one, October 19th. If you scroll down, all of the previous communications and documents are posted here. And these are the ones that Scott will primarily be going through. You'll see our return to play stage 3 gameplay document here. You'll see our stage, this is our 3B. You'll see our stage 3 document here. And you'll see other documents such as the tracking here. If you go down to our October 2nd, there is another really valuable document that Scott put together on just a return to coaching, and he'll talk a little bit about that as we present here as well. And that's where you'll find the documents that were, I'll just open one up really quickly here for reference. So this would be, for example, the return to play stage 3B indoor volleyball gameplay document that we'll refer to a little bit later more specifically. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And let Scott continue.
Okay, so John just put together a kind of a few key points here that are outlined in the documents that you find on the website there. The return to play is kind of the bigger document. That one's kind of fundamentally the same. It started back when we did our beach return to play. So a lot of the elements in that you'll see are still the same, the venue requirements, the participant requirements, etc. And then we have added some additional items as it relates specifically to the return to 6-on-6 indoor volleyball and then to games. Like you can see on your screen there at the bottom, you know, the main principles of the return to play: distancing, limiting the time of the sessions and the exposure, and making sure that we keep things clean. I don't know if you watched the press conference today. For the first time in a long time, sport was mentioned specifically by the doctor, and the statement was, you know, in the case of sports, participants should maintain distance when not active. So it was great news for us that extracurricular activities are still being allowed to continue. But there was, you know, a clear message sent, you know, making sure that we maintain distance when not active. So it seems like we have a little bit more leeway to continue sports, to continue to be active. There seems to be in our conversations that we've had with Sport Manitoba and the public health doctors that the actual activity itself is accepted as being a relatively safe environment just due to the nature of most sports. But the doctor that we have been consulting with, or Sport Manitoba has been consulting with, mentioned volleyball specifically as an activity that he thought was fairly safe. But that's on the court and playing. So our key principle is the distancing and all the stuff that's going on around and outside of our actual game or training. So John, you can flick it to the next slide there. Just a little bit of our review, the return to play review. So this is just math. We needed to come up with an idea. A lot of sports were doing this for approval. When we won't go into too much detail here, but it is in the return to play. Full-size court, we'll touch on it quickly. Full-size court, 24 athletes, basically it fits in with our cohort of 14. So if you're playing in a full-size high school gym, that's the total number of athletes that you can have allowed. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of different gyms, in a whole bunch of different places in our province. So we were trying our best to give everybody an equal opportunity to have questions answered. You know, my gym is, I want to play cross court, I want to play full court. So these are the numbers that we feel are safe, or are, maybe not safe is the right word, but allow for the greatest likelihood for physical distancing to be maintained given the size of the space that you have to train and compete in. So if you are training in a space and you're not sure, just shoot us an email or give us a call, and we can have a conversation about it. The biggest influence on these numbers is, as I just mentioned before, you know, the ability to keep the athletes distanced, or the coach's distance, or the referee's distanced when they're not actively involved in the activity. And at the bottom there, John touched on this briefly about cohorts. So, you know, if you are training, you know, don't have your athletes train back to back. You know, you have an hour-and-a-half session with the grade 10 team, and then you come back and you play an hour-and-a-half with the varsity team, right? You should try within your school or club, stay within the same cohort. Next slide there. And just a few of the, you know, key items here. Obviously, masks inside and outside of the facilities, that is a requirement from the province now. If your athletes are choosing to wear masks on the court, that is not mandatory yet. That is certainly an option that they have available to them. If we do get back to competition, we've had conversations with the referees, and it will be allowed within the rules. We've had some conversations with Volleyball Canada and some other provinces about mask use. There is no concrete research, or there's no concrete recommendation of, you know, is it safe, is it not safe? The best direction that we have is, if your athletes are comfortable using it, then by all means, go ahead and you can do so. I don't anticipate, well, in the immediate future, that we would mandate masks. That is based on the direction that we've received from Volleyball Canada and others, but it may get to that point.
Scott, I'll just chime in on that really quickly. So just for reference, the University of Winnipeg women's team has been using them. I haven't reached out to coaches or any athletes, just in terms of how it's been going and how they feel. You know, the masks may limit their volleyball actions or abilities. The CMU within MCAC has also just recently mandated masks for their athletic programs as of Monday. So just a couple of notes on that.
And then the other things you can see on the list there. John, you can click the next one. Just a couple of things regarding planning a practice. So John just alluded a little bit to this, the document, the return to coaching document, just some different things to consider when you're planning your practice. Most of what we have done is based on the public health statement of, risk, acceptable risk up to a maximum of 15 minutes cumulative of interactions inside of 2 meters. So within the volleyball context, in this document, we put a few things together just to make sure that you're not using those interactions in moments that aren't maybe essential to your training. We did a little look at some kind of a video analysis of some high school matches from last year, and the majority of the interactions inside of 2 meters take place in between the whistles, kind of in the 8 to 18 seconds or so in between the rallies, if you're in a gameplay or if you're in a practice. A lot of them are, at the net, screening, pre-serve, coverage, things like that. Middle blockers running a fake during a drill. So just a few things to consider. Hitting lines, where you're placing your players around the court. So things to consider when you're planning your practices, so that those athletes are not accumulating time inside of 2 meters when they're not participating in the drill. You can click to the next one. And a few little items here for running the practice. You yourself as a coach, when you're in there, you're probably the highest risk out of anybody in there. Throughout the course of any practice, are the one that's going to come in contact with each of your players, probably. If you're running multiple sessions or back-to-back camps, you're probably coming into contact with a number of different players. So I would say that's essential. Avoid the high fives and the handshakes, and it's involves a little bit of a change of some of our coaching behavior. I think we want to be a little bit more at an arm's length. Let the players start and stop the drills. Let the players handle the balls a little bit more than maybe you would normally. So reflect a little bit, I guess, on how you would normally do things, and then take a look at it through a COVID lens, just to make sure that you're meeting the requirements. You can flick it forward there, John. And then, so before we get started in the club season, there is just a couple of little items that don't appear on the slide. We did have a meeting last night with the Manitoba Volleyball Officials Association. So we will be putting out some recommendations for some rule amendments. We won't get into those here, but that is something that we're working with the referees on. Volleyball Canada has suggested several modifications, things like spacing on the bench, et cetera, et cetera. So we will deal with those on a rule by rule basis, and we will make those available. Probably the most significant thing that came out of our conversations with the officials is that the referees do not want to be, nor should they be, in charge of the COVID compliance. So we're working with the referees, putting together a document. It's going to come from our current return to play protocols. And there will be a position for anybody that's hosting any type of match play or competition. There'll be a position, a venue manager position, who will be in charge of all things COVID, pre-match, during match, and post-match. And this was at the request of the referees. They feel that they have enough to do with monitoring the game, and that they do not want to be responsible for managing 2 meters of distance between players on the bench, where the coaches are standing, where the masks are being worn, entry and exit from the facility, even things like the warm-up and spectators. So as we go forward, that will be an expectation of any club or program hosting a competition, that they designate a person in that role. As I said, we're going to have a little package together that we'll send out through MHSAA that will be ready for the competitions that may start as soon as next week in some areas of the province. and we'll make sure everybody has access to that, and we'll get it up on our website as soon as it's available. So I will leave it at that. There's a lot of information that you can read on the website, and as always, if you have any questions, you can fire them to John or myself.
Any questions on return to play or return to coaching or any of this so far yet, Anthony, that you see in the chat box?
Nothing in the chat right now.
Nothing yet? Okay, sounds good. Just next on the agenda, we just we'll move just forward to club volleyball specifically, and what the season may or may not look like. So just number one, just wanted to do some club regulation reminders, although this is a very, very unique year as it relates to high school and volleyball in general. And we just wanted to remind everybody that we, regardless of COVID and the effect that it's had on limiting school volleyball activity, according to our regulations, we are still within the school volleyball season, and we do request and ask all of the clubs to continue to move forward with any activity that they might have organized this fall with that in mind, with following the regulations that we have outlined within the high school season, the school season for the club volleyball regulations. We do recognize that, as I mentioned, that there has been a large number of schools that aren't doing anything, and there is a lot of athletes that are missing out on volleyball, and the clubs are filling that void that is left by that lack of school activity. We do sincerely appreciate those camps that are following our regulations and also our return to play guidelines for the safety of our participants in the community. We did have a meeting with our indoor competitions committee a little while back, or a couple of weeks ago, and we had a good discussion on how does club volleyball or how is club volleyball impacted by the current state of school volleyball due to COVID. And we even talked through around the idea of starting club volleyball earlier, but in the end it was determined that we would not do that. There's a few different reasons why we considered that and decided that, but that normal club volleyball season will start as it had been previously scheduled and currently scheduled, and that would be with the tryout period on December 5 and 6. We did do a survey a couple of weeks back, 2 or 3 weeks back, and we did get a fairly good response from the clubs out there, from club contacts and representatives. So we had about 40 responses from clubs. Considering we have about 55-ish clubs on an annual basis, this is a pretty good response rate. Just some of the questions, it was very simple, straightforward. There wasn't a lot of questions. One of the main things we wanted to determine was based on the current situation in the world and in the province, were you planning to compete this year? And we had some very positive feedback on that, and that 45% said yes, 45 said maybe, and 10% said no. The team breakdown, we did ask, if you do return, what type, what level and categories of teams are you planning on running? So it was pretty consistent. The numbers that we received were pretty consistent that we would expect in a normal year in terms of the number of 13U girls teams and the number of 14U boys teams, etc. So that was pretty consistent. One of the questions we asked, and we know is an issue, new as an issue, and we just wanted to, I guess, get that reinforced, was about gym access. So one of the questions we asked was about whether clubs had started securing gymnasiums, and about half of them did. 37.5% had not started securing gymnasiums yet. So 57.5%, so a little bit more than half, anticipated challenges in securing the gym time that they would require to accommodate the expected level of teams and training that they were going to, that they hoped to deliver throughout the year. One of the things that became apparent is that this was a serious issue. The gym access was a real main concern, and we all know that that's primarily due to schools being unavailable for outside groups to rent for obvious reasons. And it's not just an issue within Manitoba. This is an issue across the country. Pretty much, I don't think any province that I'm aware of has their school facilities being rented out to public user groups, at least especially to the volleyball clubs. A lot of clubs rely on schools. Some aren't. Some are accessing others, like those that are available currently, Dakota Community Center, Sport Manitoba. There is some facilities such as community centers, Linden Woods, Sturgeon Heights, drawn a blank on others that might be available, but there is some Soul Sanctuary, which is a church facility that's available quite a bit, 3-court facility if you use all 3. One other question that we did ask was, whether there was a desire for an early start, and there was a good percentage that did say yes. We did have 20% that were clear on no, but 27.5% were uncertain, and it was primarily the ones that were uncertain was, I don't know if I could access gyms early enough to start club season earlier. One of the things that we will be doing in the coming weeks as we continue to plan, to help us continue to plan, is we will be reaching out to the clubs to get a little bit more formal registration of their club and what their expected teams will be, or what they're planning on doing. This will help us start with the compliance requirements, but more importantly, it's going to help us with planning, so we kind of know a little bit more, and then we know this is going to be fluid. If you commit early, it doesn't mean you're locked in, and if you say, yeah, I'm running a 6-14U girls teams on November 15th, and you say that, by December 15th, we know very likely that could change, but it will help us in the planning process. Just touch really quickly on early signing. This is something new that we did this year, and I would say it was there was a decent amount of uptake on this process that we implemented. This took place September 7 to 13, and it was an opportunity for clubs to get formal commitments from athletes, and for athletes to make formal commitments to clubs, so they don't have to go through the fall period with a lot of uncertainty of if they're going to be selected come the tryout period or not. We did end up having 33 teams in total that went through this process and did pre-register athletes. And in total, there was 260 athletes, boys, girls, 16U to 18U, that did commit to a program. At first blush, it looks good, it looks positive, but we understand that it was maybe not the best year to fully evaluate how this went. But if people do have feedback on it, by all means, we're always receptive to feedback and comments, and for us, as we continue looking at this specific policy as we move forward for next season. The early signing also might provide us a little bit of better scenario as we look to the tryout period and in December, and I'll get to that in a bit here as well. So we are planning on currently proceeding with the tryout period in December, December 5th for 13U to 16U and 6 for 17-18. This is what we're currently planning. We understand that there still is access to gym issues. Some clubs right now don't have what they need to organize their tryouts in December. Another factor with tryouts is that we're realizing and understanding is that we do have current limitations on how many kids are allowed on the court at any given time. If it's a smaller gym, if you're on small half courts, it's going to be limited. And normally that's not conducive to a big tryout opportunity for 20, 30, 40 kids in a gym. That's not going to be allowed. More than likely, we shouldn't see that come this December. So what does that mean? Does it the early signing period will definitely help with that process. We are discussing with our indoor competitions committee a second early signing period. So there has been a lot of opportunity for clubs to have seen additional athletes over the fall, and they might reach out to additional athletes. This isn't 100%, but something that we're considering doing. Again, that might alleviate and help with the number of athletes required and still wanting to attend a camp and find a place to play come December. We are also looking at options to help those clubs that still may need to access facilities. We're looking for other opportunities ourselves. We're looking for out of the box ideas. I'll recognize one of them in Brandon as with Westman, the girls club, who's gone out and accessed a space at the Keystone Center and has some sport courts set up, and they're going to be using that as a facility just due to the lack of Brandon schools available for them this year. We're looking at similar options. We're trying to source sport courts. We have one, maybe two. We might buy some extra pieces. We know Dauphin's got a couple floors themselves that could be loaned out or used themselves if they can't get into their own gymnasium. So these are things that we're looking at, considering and following up on at the convention center, at exhibition hall at the Red River X, and other facilities. If people have ideas and need help with us to maybe do some inquiries, let us know. We'll reach out and try and see what we can find. The tryout period may also be extended. So normally it's about a week to 10 days before we have the official signing period being allowed. We might delay that as well, just to extend that tryout opportunity, considering the lack of facilities and the limited numbers with the RTP. And our indoor competitions committee will continue to discuss and work on these issues over the next weeks, and more information will flow as we move into later October and early November. Scott alluded to a lot of this. I don't know, Scott, maybe can I pass back to you, or do you want me to run with this one? It's just more on specific return to competition.
Yeah, no problem. I can just jump in and we'll
give me a break.
Yeah, I'll give you a break. Okay. Yeah, so the phase 3B that we have, the return to competition, you can see that the first point currently approved for areas within the yellow response level. So currently Winnipeg and the surrounding area are not in that area. That's what we will follow. That will be the guidelines for when we can and cannot compete. The concept that we laid out based on the education cohort of 75 persons, that's how we came about as a 4 to 5 team cohort. So most likely what it would look like if we are going to try some matches during the high school season and potentially during the club season is that we will not be able to schedule. Other sports are doing this as well. You won't be playing multiple teams in the same week. You won't be playing multiple teams in the same weekend. If you do have some matches during the week, it'll be against the same group. With a little bit of a break in between, just to more for contact tracing purposes and to just give everybody a little bit of peace of mind. So if we do have, let's say a 4 or a 5 team group, using the high school example that we had, they could play up to 2 matches per week on a rotating basis. When the round of matches was complete, if they wanted to continue within the same group, they could continue immediately. If they were wanting to switch to a different group currently, that involves a 14-day break, which is, seems to be the 2-week standard for changing the cohort, and then you could initiate competition within a different group.
This is where we go more specifically, Scott, into some of those rule amendments that you mentioned that we've had discussions with the referee group on. Yeah,
so there's a couple questions that just popped up in the chat here, I can see. So one question says 4 to 5 team cohorts. Does this mean moving to a league style club season instead of a tournament style? Potentially, yes. for a number of different reasons. Venue, venue capacity, the public gathering size. It would not seem to be feasible that you would have, you could have 4 or 5 or 8 teams in the same place as we traditionally would from a Saturday morning to the Saturday evening. So yeah, it doesn't mean that 100%, but it could look like that. And then the second question says, so the tournaments would be limited to a single cohort. Potentially, yes. That would be what they would, what it would be limited to. Similar to what we did in the beach league, though, we would want to make sure that if we do have 4 or 5 teams, that within that cohort, we're not in the same space for an entire day. So yeah, there's a number of different things. Modified tournament format, small waves, leagues, different things like that. So currently, and the question here, it says, who sets the cohorts? Currently, our model was based on education. So our competition model was based on what education recommended for the cohort size of 75. There are no recommendations for cohort size as it relates to sports. Some sports are just using the roster. Their current roster rules. Hockey has a cohort is a team. In other provinces, the standard cohort size ranges from 50 to 100. So you see in some of only the Western provinces are really allowed to do anything right now. A little bit in the Atlantic, but mostly in the West. So the cohort size is limited to 50 people. It was 100 in BC. And if you were to change your cohort, it was a 2-week break to change from one to the other.
So Scott, this is our next slide anyway. So we're talking about more concepts for club competition. So if any more questions come on that, we'll address them just as we go to the next slide. But maybe just finish off some of the rule amendment summaries. We don't have to go into detail nuts and bolts about them, but these were just some of the concepts considered for the rule amendments.
Yeah, so just real quick, some of the rule amendments, team benches, if any of you watch the NBA style playoffs. So it would be the elimination of the warm-up zone, the 3x3 warm-up there. So the benches would be spread out in distance. Each player would have their own space on the bench that they would go to. They would be allowed to move around. Masks for players on the bench, players and coaches on the bench, requirement when you're not on the court. We already talked on the next one there. Score sheet, coin toss, lineup cards. Want to limit the number of people that are handling these things, filling out the score sheets. So be prepared to have your stickers ready. Take pictures of things. We'll be verifying through photos, sharing of documents that way, and not filling out the score sheets by hand, verifying results, et cetera, et cetera. We mentioned a little bit about between the serves. If we can imagine a line that keeps everybody 1 meter away from the net in between the rallies, as well as, keeping front court players in the front court, back court players in the back court during those moments when the ball's not in play. Those are not necessarily a rule consideration, but things that you can start to work in your practices. Substitutions, not coming into the free zone anymore. We spoke that the substitutions you would acknowledge them as regular. They would just take place in front of the bench. Timeouts, again, we considered the court being used, keeping things spaced out. Water would have to be consumed in your space on the bench, but the whole zone could be used for timeout. And then equipment sanitation, just making sure that you have some clean equipment there and that we're rotating it out on a regular basis. And if you do have spectators, similar to the beach league, if you have a ball that, bounces around, gets handled by multiple people other than the athletes, that we'd want to take that out of play.
Any questions on the rule side of things before we talk concepts of the club season coming up for competition there, Anthony or Scott?
We did have one question from Lisa about how cohorts will be determined. I did answer in the chat that quite frankly, right now, we don't know. There are a lot of options on the table. It could be a regional thing where teams are just competing sort of in their region, if that's what the options are. We've kind of talked about a little bit, maybe using some of the soft rankings from where we ended off last year. Right now we're still working on exactly how that will look and how we'll figure out who plays who to start, and then maybe how we advance through the season going that way.
Yeah. So I think that kind of covers what this slide captures. So the season will definitely look different. There is definitely challenges. We won't see the normal big tournaments like we normally do. The big 6-court, 30 some odd teams over at Dakota, large gatherings in the mezzanines. Those are super spreaders. We are looking at concepts, as Anthony said. So is it a cohort league? Is it a mini tournament, weekend tournament structure? Again, we don't know exactly right now. We don't know, the other challenge right now is we don't know how many teams are going to be registered in each category, and whether they want to compete tier 1, tier 2. We have facility challenges in terms of how we're going to structure this. With what we currently have booked and what we might be able to continue to book for ourselves, and whether clubs are hosting their own cohort tournaments or not is another consideration or question to determine. And we have clubs that are in Dauphin and in Virden and Steinbach and Winnipeg and everywhere in between, and that has to be considered as along with relevant competition. So do we want the top seeds in the province, top clubs, playing the tier 2 type clubs? And these are all things that need to be addressed and need to be considered as we move forward here. Anything else on questions there, Anthony?
We had a question, about how we're going to fit rural teams in. Yeah. And as I said, I think that's still we're still working on it. It's obviously not a group that we're forgetting about, especially the teams that are more remote and away from any major center. But we're figuring out how to accommodate those teams.
For sure, yeah. And honestly, it's not like we have all the answers and we're ready to go. So if there's suggestions and comments, you can make them now, or you can forward them to us by email, and we'll definitely share them with our indoor competitions committee and look at any concept that someone might bring forward. Again, this is if we continue normalcy. These are the dates that we currently had booked for provincial championships and the respective national championship that goes along with that. I will say that we have facilities booked and are planning on those dates, but obviously we will continue to monitor as we go through the fall or go through the winter and spring and determine if provincials will be held, and if so, in what structure and format will we be delivering them. Volleyball Canada's nationals are still currently on the schedule and on the table. They're continuing to plan, as we are, the 14U event at the Convention Center in May for the 14U championship. However, they won't make any decisions, at least to cancel, until at least the early new year. So that's kind of the timeline that they're looking at. We're planning as normal. We have some meetings starting next week with Volleyball Canada, with our hosting plans and where we are and what we're doing, and we'll continue that over the duration until we know it's going to happen or it's not going to happen.
John, as Winnipeg goes orange right now, is there a date that we've decided where it has to be yellow again, or we'll just cancel everything? I don't think we've discussed that yet, but that was just a question in the chat.
Canceling club volleyball, you mean? And is that the question?
That's how I'm reading it, yeah.
So can you, if we continue to be in the orange response level, we haven't
At what
come up
point?
with a date with whether, when we would cancel club or not. I think if we can run some club training and competition starting in February, March, we would look at those options. Anything that's on the table for sure.
Yeah, and I think I would go further to say that even if we're not able to run competition, we would still encourage clubs to do training to keep their athletes engaged, because
If that's
especially
the only
considering last year
option.
got cut short, that we want to make sure we can retain these athletes, because if we don't, there's a chance that they just drop out altogether, or they end up in another sport, or they go do something else. So I think even if we can't be competing, it's important that we try to do some training. We keep the athletes in the sport.
Good points for sure. Yeah. So
I
our
think
last slide here is just a really quick overview on the national landscape. So we kind of know what the provincial landscape is with what's going on in most schools and school zones and school divisions and Winnipeg or outside of Winnipeg, and the club activity or camps that are occurring right now, and intend to initiate as of December. We're not unique in Manitoba. We might be in a better position for volleyball specifically in terms of what we're currently allowed to do than other provinces. Other provinces might be in a better position than we are. Primarily those provinces that have school volleyball during the fall, and that would be Western Canada, Nova Scotia, maybe one or two of the other smaller provinces. There's not much high school activity going on. There might be Nova Scotia, maybe a little bit in Alberta, if I'm not mistaken, in divisions or cohort groups. But I'm not, from our discussions with all the other provinces that we have every couple of weeks, they're all in the same boat. Their clubs and their schools are not letting their school gymnasiums be accessed. So school facilities are an issue across the country. A lot of clubs in Ontario, I'd say a bigger percentage of clubs in Ontario utilize school gymnasiums than the percentage in Manitoba do. They might be looking at a 40% return rate. We don't know what ours will be in the end, but everyone is challenged by this same issue. Some provinces are delaying their start of their club. It doesn't mean that nothing is happening or that they don't have guidelines and plans in place right now and tryouts continuing in December. But some provinces such as Ontario used to start already. They're looking at no competition already until January. They might have announced something earlier, just about some kind of competition concept in later November, but they've been affected considerably by the delay. And everyone is looking at modified competition format. So what we're looking at, I propose there, it's not something that we just made up. It's a concept that BC is looking at. They're looking more at a regional-based small cohort format, for their younger groups, and maybe more of a, allowing for more of an elite provincial cohort at the older levels. I think Ontario and Saskatchewan might be looking at similar concepts. So we're sharing information. We're kind of looking at what other people are doing, and we're trying to determine what's best for Manitoba, what fits best for our province and for our clubs within the province here.
John, for looking at our early signing window for that we might be considering here to limit tryouts, we'd be looking at that for all ages, right? Not just the older groups as we were with the first one?
Yeah, not certain on that. It's possible, whether it continues to just be 16 or 18 or go younger into the 15, 14, 13. It's a consideration we have to make. Usually, the 13, 14 categories have the highest level of attendance at tryouts, and that's something we do have to consider for sure. that's where we are at with the presentation, with club volleyball and volleyball in general here, and more of an opportunity for people. We're here. You have our attention. Can address any questions that we might be able to answer at current time.
We have a question in the chat. Are our fees and Volleyball Canada fees remaining the same for this upcoming season? My understanding is Volleyball Canada fees have gone up $1, and I don't believe we have made any changes to our fees.
Yeah, and it is a discussion that we will have depending on how limited or how affected the club season. Currently our plan was fees as normal. Having said that, it doesn't mean that won't change depending on circumstances.
Scott, a question for you. Is the key thing to try to keep distancing and masking the best that you can for training and games?
Yeah, well, 100%. You go back to the provincial documents. They talk about a layered approach and always leading with distancing and followed up by masks and then you've heard it a million times, right? Keeping your hands clean, washing your hands probably before, sanitizing during, and making sure your athletes are cleaning their hands afterwards. I would add additionally to that is shared touched surfaces, so things like water bottles and when your athletes are eating or drinking or whatever in the gym, keeping them spaced out when that's happening as well.
Thanks, Scott. One more question here is, could we consider limiting team practice or club teams training, practicing per week / per month that would allow more teams a chance to practice? I think this is something we've talked about, but obviously it would take buy-in from everybody, and we would also need to just work with a lot of facilities, and we'd kind of have to have a little bit maybe more control of what facilities are offering. But it's definitely something we've talked about, and securing some space where we can rent it out equitably to clubs that are in need. So I know we're looking at something like that. And one more question here. When are we making the decision on the early signing window, the second early signing window? John, I'm not sure exactly when we were looking at it, but it's kind of an ongoing discussion, eh?
Yeah,
we'd have to talk about the competition committee.
Understand time is of the essence with this as well. I would suggest it wouldn't be earlier than starting mid-November. Maybe it's the last week or the third week of November. Something we have to converse with the Indoor Competitions Committee, Roger Labossiere. I'm not sure if Roger's on the call or not, but he's the chair of the Competitions Committee, and we have numerous representatives on that committee from around the province representing various clubs. So we'll have that discussion and try and get that information out and decided upon sooner, hopefully, than later.
Is there a plan if a region were to go into level red?
I think we'd have to address that. I think that might answer the question in and of itself. I would imagine that a lot of things would be restricted, and probably sport activities would be among them, would be my guess.
I've got no more questions right now. I think this would be your opportunity. Anybody, if you do have another question, chime in now. If not, you can send us an email, and we'll be able to get back to you.
Yeah, we'll stay on for a few more minutes. Just in some closing comments. Again, I'll reiterate some of the comments from my opening words. Is just continue to I appreciate and respect the work that everybody's been doing. Those that have been running programs, and we do see some articles in the news on volleyball and on other sports and how some outbreaks are happening in beer league hockey and not following return to play guidelines or the public health guidelines as well as they should be. And like I said, I think we all have a responsibility to do this, and I think we're all serious about this and appreciate the consequences. If we get a little bit lazy or lax in some of the protocols and it's on all of ours as a responsibility, and we we hope that the numbers will start to de-escalate and we see more of a positive trend in the case counts and more of a reversing of the response levels, within certain areas of the province and all areas of the province as we move forward in the coming weeks here and as we get towards club season. That's our goal. Our goals might be different this year than normal in normal years for what we hope to get out of club and what our athletes hope to get out of club, and that's something I think we have to recognize as well. But thanks to everybody for attending here. I hope it's been informative and beneficial. And by all means, we're not there yet, and we'll continue to work and continue to plan and continue to communicate on updates as we move along here. Any more, Anthony, that you see?
Not right now. Looks like we're getting good to go here. Are we really, I guess, tracking whether people are following the rules and stuff? Not really, right? Because right now there isn't any sanctioned activity going on.
Tracking the rules of the return to play guidelines?
Yes.
No, we're not doing any audits or anything of that nature right now. Again, we're stressing for everybody to be diligent and take responsibility upon yourself. We're only hurting everybody if we're not. If it needs to get to that point during the club season, it's quite possible that audits, might be required, and we might need to implement that type of consideration. Yep. Again, we'll take a few minutes. We'll just hang out on Zoom here for any questions that might come through. But again, thanks, as Anthony said, thanks for your time tonight. Feel free to communicate, reach out, give us a call, send us an email. I'm looking at the chat now too, Anthony. So I see a message from Ted. Rural areas, it might make more sense to have different age levels in one cohort. Good consideration, Ted. Thanks for that feedback. We'll definitely consider that. Thanks, Grant. Hope things are going well at BU.
John, do we have a timeline on like cohort info in terms of like how we'll be deciding, I guess, who's in what cohort and that kind of stuff? I mean, my understanding is that we would be like, we might start somewhere, but that's not where we would end, right? Like we would have maybe a team of or a group of 4 competing together, and then 2 weeks later we would have a different group, right? You wouldn't just be like in your cohort and staying there all season long.
No, I think we want to have some cross competition if that's what people want, especially. Yeah. Jared's asking, what's the painting over my right shoulder? This is actually a painting from one of our referee in chief's wives. It's I got this from Ed Tave's wife. It's just a. Is that what you wanted to see, Jared? It's one of those tundra buggies up north in Churchill. So I see your message, James, about the biggest concern, assume that's from Joust, is gym time, and we get that for sure, yeah. as soon as you have an idea on how to get gym time, the better. Yeah. Um, you know, you, I think you know which ones we mentioned are available. We know there's limitations into what is available out there, and continue to stay in touch with us, and we'll continue to stay in touch with others on other opportunities that might exist that might have some availability throughout the club season right now. So Lindsay's question is, 2 coaches to a group apply to competition only or training also? I don't know, Scott, if you want to just answer that one.
Well, it's number, it's kind of a guideline. So it's the maximum sort of number of people in the space. So you could change, as long as the total number doesn't exceed the recommendation, it can be whatever breakdown you like.
It's good, Lindsay. Okay, I'll give it a couple more minutes, and if there's any more questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, we'll log out. People are, I think we still have 35 people on board here. People are waiting for questions from other people. Yeah, exactly. Michelle, did you want to play us a little piano tune while we're waiting for questions?
Well, I don't know. I can actually hit it right here. There you go.
There we go. Okay, we'll take that. Next town hall. Good question, James. We'll think about that, and maybe when there's a good enough time for more significant information to pass on. But that's a good question, and more than likely, as we normally do, we run the the club organizational meetings usually early December. We might do those early and provide all the updates at that point, whether it's mid-November or something along those lines or earlier. So good question for us to consider. Thanks.
John, I just had a question about nationals. Not that I foresee it happening, but just in case. Would there be a chance that we would register for nationals and then before a concrete answer is decided to then lose a large portion of your entry fee?
Yeah, I think what I understand from Volleyball Canada is they might be sending out a survey at the end of November or in November sometime, maybe mid to later November. I might find out a little bit more next week when we talk to them on our hosting call. They want to get an idea, just it's kind of we did, are you planning on attending nationals if they're organized? Yes, no, maybe. Just so they have an idea on what they might be able to plan or deliver even if things are structured differently. Having said that, I think registration is mid-January. And we might know by then if they're canceled or not.
VC's looking at a few different options. They might even push registration back if they're still very unsure it might happen. They could push registration back into February even for nationals. They've everything's kind of on the table for them as well as us, really.
Yeah. Kyle got your message about for Prov there. Hanover Southeast doesn't have good solutions right now. So what about Kyle? Is Providence open for public bookings, i.e. for your club? Is Kyle still there? Maybe he left. And Dean looks like he's walking around Keystone Center there.
I think Kyle just said not yet, but working hard.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, okay, thanks, Kyle. And Lisa Katz, HLC and BU?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's now we're running camps 4 days a week right now at BU, and it's going really well. The kids are having fun. They're just glad to be doing something. So Kevin's running one and Lee's running the other one, and it's going really well. And hopefully that's where we'll practice for the season, but can't officially announce that yet. So we just gotta waiting it out.
Okay. I see a few other names on the board here. I'm gonna just, Jared, what about 204 in terms of bookings for the season?
Yeah, we've got a couple days a week at Soul Sanctuary and a couple days at Lindenwoods. And they're still kind of holding some time for some senior leagues and stuff that they're waiting to see what's going to happen. They don't want to take that time away from them. But, yeah, they seem to be pretty cooperative with getting people in there. And the 3 courts are nice, obviously. But we've got a pretty good block. I think Dynamo's there right now with a couple days a week doing some camp stuff there too. So I think for the most part they have quite a bit of volleyball going through, a little bit of karate. Other than that, I think they're pretty much just doing a lot of volleyball stuff altogether. So
yeah, good for them, I think. Yeah. Sydney, is there any junior bison update?
Nothing as of yet. I know that a couple proposals have been sent in to the dean, and it's getting looked over by a board that has to kind of go through all the risks and rewards and so on and so forth. So I know we're just waiting on that last proposal.
Nothing confirmed. Okay. Yeah. And I don't know if that's Jeff. Is that Jeff Maxwell with the Cougars? Is he? Is that him there or someone else? No. Okay. While we have the last minute here, anybody else want to do a quick update on their status in relation to facility access? Heard about Joust and Cats and Westman and Prov and 204. Not sure.
I just had a question, John.
Yeah.
Basically, and I can't get my camera to work. I wanted to show you my painting, but that's a whole other topic. But basically, I just was curious, like, has there been any discussion with Volleyball Canada to maybe limit the teams at nationals to more of a qualification style this year instead of an open, so that it would just be kind of for the teams who say are, top 3 in each province or whatever, something, so that it could still happen, but it wouldn't have to be such a big thing, and it could be controlled as far as how many numbers they actually would have?
I understand they're brainstorming numerous options. As you know, the nationals are, considerable events within their, their annual budget and finances, and to go another year without them would hit them really hard. So I think they're considering a lot of options Whether that's one of them specifically, I can't say, but I would imagine it could be. All right. Well, thanks again for those that stuck it out to the end. Sorry I missed when you called my name. Cougars volleyball, but we'll be using ACC gym. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's good to know that you got a place to do some training out in Brandon for your club as well. Okay, thanks again, everybody. And I know I do see a couple emails rolling through, and we'll get back to people if they've sent. And take care, and we'll talk again soon.